think we're up here. What's up, everybody? My name is Chad. I am a singer-songwriter, musician, and director. This is the first, I guess, episode, if it becomes a thing. I'd like it to become a thing, called BrewFOs, because I'm very interested in a lot of things that's going on in the world. If you guys have been paying attention in the news, there's a lot of UFO stuff popping up, which now is UAP, Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon. I'm really curious about it all. I'm not what you call a believer. I look at things with a skeptical mind, but a lot of it is really interesting, and I have no idea what the hell's going on. And so I wanted to talk to more people about it. This kind of started with some of me and my wife Laura's friends. We would just kind of like have a beer or kombucha or whatever, coffee, and we'd talk about things like this, unidentified aerial phenomenon, and other subjects about consciousness and different world events, history, how things tie in together. Anyway, let's get Scott on here. Scott Wolter, me and my wife first watched him on his show called America Unearthed. And I believe at the time, I could be wrong about this, I believe that was History Channel, History 2 maybe. And then I think it went to Travel Channel. Actually, I can pull it up right here in front of me so I can get it right. But Scott is a forensic geologist. He is the inventor of, let's see if I get this right, Archaeopotography, a process used to date and understand the origins of inscribed stone artifacts. That's pretty cool. It says some people call him the real-life Indiana Jones. He's done some pretty interesting stuff. He's worked for our government. In particular, he did let's see here. He analyzed the fire damage to the concrete at the Pentagon after the September 11th terrorist attacks. Whoa. And he helped the Las Vegas police investigate a homicide where a victim was found buried in concrete. I'm sure he's done a lot of other things. He's a Freemason. We're going to talk about that. He knows a lot about the Knights Templar. And we're also going to bring up something called the Cremona document, which is really, really interesting. But let's send Scott an invite here. And you guys don't have to listen to me talk anymore. Let's see here. All right, sending you an invite, Scott. Let's see if this works. And whoever's joining us now, thank you for being here. I'll put this up later, so if people are watching this later, thanks for checking this out. Let's try Scott one more time here. Scott's actually driving too, so I hope we don't accidentally make him crash or something. Scott, are you getting this? And since this is BrewFOs, today I'm in no affiliation with these guys. I just love their beer. A local San Diego brewery called Virgin Beer. I'm drinking the Travana. So cheers, everybody. If anyone out there's got a coffee or a beer or a tea. Scott, where you at? I'm going to send it to him one more time. All right. Let's see here. If you guys haven't checked out America Unearthed, look it up. It's pretty fun. It's It really is like real life Indiana Jones stuff. He does a lot of cool stuff I would be way too scared to do. Let's see. Let's see here. We're trying again. Here we go. Scott, you out there? Let's do it one more time. I apologize, guys. I hope I'm doing this right. This is my first Instagram live, so let's see. Scott, we're here. We are ready. We are beckoning you from the ether. Scott was telling me a story, actually, that he was looking for Montezuma's treasure, and he had to go on a scuba diving mission, and some cave underwater that was only 4 feet tall, and it sounds really scary to me. I don't know how that guy does that stuff. He did not find the treasure. So, but it was either he was gonna keep going through this cave and risk possible death, or oh wait, here we go. Here's Scott. Or get out of the cave, and he chose to get out of the cave. And I think that was smart, because I'm glad he's still around. Okay, here we go. Oh, there we go.
I got distracted. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I'm sorry.
It's totally fine. How are you doing?
I'm good. Did you get the intro done?
Yeah. I hope it didn't mess anything up. I was trying to say the Archaeopotography. Is that how you say it?
Archaeopotography.
Archaeopotography.
Yeah.
There we go. Okay. Cool. And
it's a mouthful, believe me. Not many people can say it right the first time or the second time.
Yeah. Could you explain a little bit of what that is exactly?
Okay.
And well, cheers, by the way. Cheers.
Oh, wait a minute.
I know you're driving.
All I got is water, man. What's going on here?
And anyone that's watching, beer, water, coffee.
It's all good, right?
It's all good. But cheers.
Okay, cheers. So basically, archaeopotography it's a word that I made up that basically, in my work, we do what is called concrete petrography or rock petrography, which is essentially an autopsy on concrete and rock. And typically we employ those techniques in the lab when something goes wrong with concrete. Either it has low strength, it cracks, the top peels off, whatever the case may be. But in this case, what we're doing is we're applying these laboratory techniques to archaeological artifacts and trying to do things like determine, first of all, what the rock type is, and if there's man-made marks or it's an object, an inscription, whatever it might be, try to understand what tools may have made it, how deep things are, what the weathering profile is like, and most importantly, how old that weathering profile might be to tell you how old that artifact is. So there's all kinds of techniques that we use. We use optical microscopy, like reflected light microscopy, polarized light microscopy, 3D imaging, scanning electron microscopy. All this stuff can be applied. It just depends on what the situation is. If it's something in the field, we may take samples back to the lab. If it's an artifact that can be sent to us, we'll look at it under the microscopes in the lab. It's quite varied, actually, and I have to say we've had pretty good success, and not only verifying the authenticity of certain artifacts like the Kensington runestone, the Spirit Pond runestones, Tucson lead artifacts, the Bat Creek stone, many others, but we have also been able to verify that some artifacts are not old and that they were hoaxes, or they were created with the intention to deceive. And so this archaeopotography is a very valuable science. And as far as I know, I'm the only person out there doing this in a meaningful way.
Yep, that's incredible. I was good in the intro. I was telling people about the Pentagon, and also the was it in Las Vegas. It's in your bio on I think it's the History Travel Channel.
Yeah, the Las Vegas murder case.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was really an amazing project, because we actually won an award from the engineering community for applying petrographic techniques in a new way. And I don't know if you want me to tell you about that. I can give you an overview. It was a really sad case, but it was fascinating from a scientific standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to go into that, I mean, even if you want to talk a little bit about the Pentagon too, I mean, after 9/11, that'd be cool too.
Okay, well, I'll start with the Pentagon. You know, it was, I mean, everybody, you know, that was an adult or not even adult, anybody that was probably 5 years old or older remembers what happened that day in 9/11. And I remember that day vividly. I was driving to work and I was listening to Tom Bernard on the radio, and he's kind of a sarcastic radio host. And I remember he was reporting about a small plane. They thought it was a small plane that hit the first tower, and then all of a sudden I heard him say, "What the hell?" And then the second plane hit, and then I remember I got to work and everybody was upstairs on a television in the conference room, and we were watching as the towers fell. And I remember how frustrating that was and how sad, and I'm like, oh my God, firefighters are going up. I knew that was going on, and it was just terrible. Yeah. And, you know, I remember, you know, everybody wants to do something. You're angry, you're upset. And I remember, you know, being frustrated that there's really nothing you can do. And then 11 days later, I got a call, and I was assigned to the Pentagon. And one of our clients on the East Coast, Engineering Consulting Services, they were working with the lead structural engineer, a guy by the name of Alan Kilsheimer, who I got to know very well on that project, assigned us to do this work. And what happened is they sent us 170 concrete samples from structural elements in the concrete, meaning columns and beams that had been impacted by the jet fuel fire inside the building. And it wasn't until we got, you know, involved that I realized how far the plane penetrated into the building. And remember, it was loaded with fuel because it had just taken off and it was supposed to go to California. Yeah. So the explosion was huge, and the jet fuel fire was very hot, and it burned for a long time.
Can I ask you a question about that real quick?
Yeah.
So I know there's a lot of people that have like conspiracy theories, like it wasn't a plane, but like you can say firsthand and just put that to bed, like you know that was jet fuel.
Yeah. In fact,
okay.
In fact, here's a true story. Okay, I'm going to tell you a story I don't tell many people.
Yeah.
You know, after I got that project, of course, you know, I was excited because this is a big deal, right? And now we have an opportunity to do something, and, you know, obviously there's notoriety that goes with it and all of that. So I went home, and the next day I was excited, and I wanted to get into work early, and I got in at about 7 o'clock. I have about a 40-minute drive to my office. And when I got there, nobody else was there, and I smelled something unusual, and it turns out it was jet fuel. And I walked into the lab, and then I walked down the hallway to my office, and I went into my office, and on my chair there was a box, and inside were the first samples from the Pentagon. Whoa. The next day. And they were sitting on my chair, And I went down to the drillers, and they usually get in there about 5:30, 6 o'clock. And I said, hey, guys, did a delivery truck come in here and bring this sample? And they said no. And to this day, I don't know how the hell those samples got in my office.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm not making
crazy.
this up. I'm telling you the truth. So
Yeah,
anyway, so basically
Wow.
what we did was we examined these for fire damage. And essentially what they wanted us to do was determine what the temperatures were at the level of the reinforcing steel. And so I don't know if you've ever been on a construction site where they're placing columns, but they'll have these long pieces of steel that go up, and then they have hoop steel that holds it all together, and they put it inside of a shaft, and then they pour the concrete in, right? And those are columns, and they make usually square ones, long square-shaped beams that are steel reinforced. Well, they were extra steel reinforced in the Pentagon when it was built on September 11th, 1941 is when they broke ground. 60 years to the day, and no, that was not a coincidence.
Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah. So in any case, our job was to see what the temperatures were at the level of the reinforcing steel. And typically there's about 2 inches of covered concrete before you get from the outside to when you get to the steel. And the temperature, the magic number is 573 degrees Celsius. And basically what happened is after we looked at 175 samples, there were way more samples that temperature was reached at the level of the reinforcing steel than they ever imagined. And so the initial plan was to do the analysis, and based on our results, we're going to leave this one, repair that one, tear that one out, and redo it. Well, it was so bad, and there were so many columns that were, needed to be taken out. They said, screw it, we're going to tear it all out and rebuild it from scratch. And that's what happened.
So with the information and knowledge and data that you got from that, did they rebuild it a different way because of the results you found?
That's a really good question, and the answer is yes and no.
Okay.
They have measures put in, and honestly, I can't really talk about some of the stuff that I know because it's still classified.
Yeah, that's understandable.
But absolutely they did. And I was also out there, I think 3 different times during the Reconstruction, and the whole goal was to rebuild the Pentagon within a year after the attack, and we finished 3 weeks early, and we're all very proud of that. But they did some very interesting things that were state of the art at the time. High strength concrete with accelerators to get it to set up faster without cracking, and so it was technologically pretty impressive.
Yeah. Wow. Well, staying on this topic, do you want to talk a little bit about Las Vegas and the body found in concrete? Is that right?
Sure. Yeah. So what happened was I got a call from Detective Tom Monahan with the Las Vegas Homicide Department.
Wow.
And I remember getting the call, and I'm thinking, wow, why is he calling me? And
yeah.
he said you came highly recommended, and I said, well, what's the situation? He said, well, we have a young female murder victim that was found buried in a shallow grave in the desert outside of Las Vegas. And I remembered thinking, I bet that's not the first one, and actually that's quite common. But
wow.
And I said, okay, and he said, but she was found totally encased in concrete. And I said, oh. And I said, well, what do you need me for? And he said, well, we're hoping that you might be able to help us age date the concrete so we can establish a time of death for this murder victim so that we can begin to try to identify her, because, the murder investigation can't begin until they know who this person is. And they had no idea. So I said to him, Well, I've got a couple of ideas, but I've never done anything like this before. I don't know anyone else that's ever done anything like this before. And I said, I make no guarantees, but if you want to try it, I said, I'm willing to try. And he said, we have nowhere else to go. And so we said, let's do it. And I remember I asked him another question. I said, pardon me, but I said, how did you find her? And he said, what happened was a guy was out jogging in the desert with his dog. And he happened to step on the area of the body that's between the belly button and the genital area, because that's where the concrete was the thinnest. And the guy, it collapsed because it was only a few inches of dirt over the concrete, over the grave. And then the dog immediately went to the hole, and this guy reaches in this hole and starts pulling bones out.
Oh my God.
And he pulled out what turned out to be a human femur, and then he called 911. So what are the odds of that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that was the one spot that structurally the concrete was thin enough so that it failed under that load of a guy jogging, right? So the next day, I booked a flight and I flew out to the next day. I arrived in Las Vegas at 10:30 in the morning. I remember all this stuff. And Detective Rob Wilson picked me up at the airport. It was a beautiful sunny day, and it was hot. And then he took me to the coroner's lab. And I remember walking in that building, and it was dark, and it was cold and austere. And I remember the first thing I saw were these 5 gurneys with dead bodies, all naked, and you can see various trauma. Yeah. And I went walking by, and I'm looking at these things, and I thought to myself, we're not in Minnesota anymore.
How do you deal with that? I mean, how did you deal with that stuff? Like for me, I get queasy. I love horror movies and stuff, but I get queasy about that stuff in real life.
Well, I don't enjoy that, but I've seen death a few times, and these bodies were not bloody, and it's like if you've ever seen a bad car accident, there's blood and there's gore, and it wasn't like that. This was more clinical. These people had been dead for a while, and they were in the morgue, right?
Yeah. And
they were getting ready for autopsy. So I've seen that, so it didn't bother me. But anyway, so the next thing is they wheeled out this large gurney with a huge yellow body bag, and they unzipped it in this examination room, and this was the concrete. And then there was a paper grocery bag, honest to God, with the bones, with this woman's bones. And I got to tell you, Chad, when I started to look at the concrete, and the coroner was standing right here, and Tom was on the other side, and we're just talking. I'm talking with the medical examiner and asking him questions. And you got to remember, everything is in reverse, right? So in the face, if your nose sticks out, right? Well, in the concrete, it was a depression. So everything is reversed.
Gotcha.
And it took me a while to sort of get my bearings of what I was looking at, but and there was trauma. It was pretty gruesome. So anyway, I was looking at the concrete, asking questions, and then eventually I said, I want to take samples here, here, and here. And I need to describe to you what happened so you can sort of get a sense of why I took samples where I did. So the perpetrator dug a trench, and then he poured the concrete, a layer on the bottom. He put the victim in, and then he placed another load over the legs to about, the belly button area. And then the last load went over the torso, the arms, and the head. So it was placed in 3 lifts. I was able to figure that out pretty quick. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And what I learned was that the concrete that was placed over the body did not bond with the concrete on the bottom, so there was a gap along the side of the victim between the arms and the body that was open to the ground. And this was important, and you'll see why in a little bit. So I took samples from all three areas, all three loads, and on the piece that was over the body, I took it on the edge. And there was a reason why I did that. So anyway, we went back to the lab. I made the thin sections. And the two clocks that I was thinking about is when you place concrete, you know, it's wet and it's fluid, but then it starts to set up. And that's a heat generating chemical reaction. And slowly but surely it gets hard and it gets strong, right? But what happens is concrete, the way it sets up is a lot like microwave popcorn. And you know how it goes. You turn it on, it heats up, and then it starts popping. Poppity pop, 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 right? That's exactly how concrete sets up. And in fact, the hydration will continue for years and decades. So if I took a sample of concrete a day after it's placed, a year after it's placed, 10 years, 50 years, the amount of unhydrated Portland, which is a small percentage, will be different. Even though it's the same concrete, it'll get less over time. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, that was the first clock. The second clock was based on a chemical reaction called carbonation. And what happens is carbon dioxide that is in the atmosphere, right? It's everywhere. We breathe it out. Will react with the lime. The calcium hydroxide is one of the byproducts of the hydration of Portland cement. The lime will react with carbon dioxide to make calcium carbonate, which is limestone, hence carbonation. Now, this reaction is a function of the amount of CO2, carbon dioxide gas, and the porosity of the concrete. The more water you put in a mixture, the more porous it'll be. And the faster and deeper carbonation will take place once it's exposed to the atmosphere. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's,
I mean, it's as much as I can for my brain, but yes.
Right. Well, this was the other clock.
Okay.
So the bottom line was this, is that when I was talking to the coroner, one of the questions I asked him is, I said, what's the primary gas that's formed when a body decomposes? And I just assumed that it was methane. It's not. It's carbon dioxide. And because there was an open gap between the body and the two lifts, when the body decomposed, it was kicking off carbon dioxide. And it was escaping out the side and going to the surface. And it was carbonating that concrete. And there was a deep carbonation profile there, but on the other samples, it was very shallow because the concrete had a lot of clinker placed with a low water content. And so what it told me was the concrete was not that old. And I ended up writing a report, and I said the concrete was between 1.5 and 3 years old. So I wrote my report and I sent it off. And I thought, I will never hear from these guys again. About 4 weeks later, Tom called me and he said, Scott, we're coming to Minneapolis. We're working on a 22-year-old cold case, murder case, and we want to come by and see your lab. And I said, great. And Tom and I had talked, and we both played in men's hockey leagues, and I thought, I'll take him to a Wild game. So I got tickets. He comes into town with Detective Rob Monahan, and I took him to Allery's Bar before we went to the game. And Allery's Bar in St. Paul is a cop bar.
Okay.
And we pay for a beer all night because when law enforcement visits another town, their brothers take care of them. Well, these guys are from Las Vegas, right? So anyway, we're sitting there drinking our beer, and Tom looks at me, and he goes, so what do you really think? And I knew what he was asking me. And I said, Tom, I think she's been there. between 1.5 and 2 years, but I feel like I could testify to between 1 and 3 years. And he said, me too. And then we finished our beers. We went to the game. The Wild won. They got on their plane, went back to Vegas, and I thought, that's it. We'll never hear from them. About 6 weeks later, he calls me again. He said, Scott, are you on your computer? I said, yes. He said, go to missingkids.com. And in less than a minute, I was looking at her face. A 17-year-old runaway with a history of running away.
Okay.
And I got very emotional because I have a young daughter, and I was thinking about that the whole time. Some family is wondering where their daughter is. And I just looked at him and I said, how'd you do it? And he said, you remember those molds that we took of her face and of other parts of the body? And I said, yes. He said, well, we aired that mold of her face on America's Most Wanted, and we got one phone call. And it was an amateur sleuth, a woman in Las Vegas, who said, I think I know who your Jane Doe is. She gave him the name. They pulled the dental records. They had the upper and lower jaw, and it was a match.
Wow.
And then he said, I thought you'd like to know that she was reported missing a year and 10 months from when we found her.
Wow.
And I remember I hung up the phone and I said to myself, God damn, this shit actually worked.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So that was, that was really something. But I'm still waiting for one more phone call, because the last thing he said to me is, are you willing to testify if we ever bring this to trial? And I said, hell yes.
Yeah.
So I'm waiting for one more call, but it hasn't happened yet.
That's an incredible story. Did the family get closure then?
Well, I will say this: there's more that I know that I really can't talk about.
Gotcha.
Because
Yeah.
it compromised the investigation. But they're working on it.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Wow. That's some crazy stuff.
That's some crazy shit, man. And,
that's why I wanted to talk to you about this stuff.
but I have to say I'm proud of that work, and I've been very fortunate with a lot of these, and this has nothing to do with, America Unearthed and the Kensington Runestone,
Yeah.
and the Templars and all of that stuff, and Freemasonry. Even if none of that stuff happened, I've been very fortunate in my career to be involved in these amazing projects. And I think, when the day comes up, when they put my ashes in the ground somewhere, they'll probably talk about the Pentagon before they talk about the Kensington Runestone of the Templars. So I'm proud of that work.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, and I wanted people to understand that. I wanted to understand it better. That's why I wanted you to go into it. So thank you for talking about that.
Absolutely.
Pretty incredible stuff.
Happy to.
Let's move on to like Freemasons and Masonry, because you're a Freemason.
Yes, I am.
You're a Freemason, or a brother, as you say. And I'm curious about it. I talked to you briefly, but I was telling you that both my wife and I, we found out our grandpas were Masons, and we had no idea. Like within 6 months of each other, we found out our grandparents were Freemasons. It's like, what? I didn't know that.
Yeah. Well, it's you and I talked about it a little bit, but the era of at least my father and probably your father and grandfather, they kept it very quiet. It was something that you weren't supposed to talk about. And part of the reason for that, I think, is it was just the era. But, and we talked about this too, the Roman Catholic Church, they don't like us. And, they make it clear to their followers that Freemasonry is bad, and they're doing devil worship and whatever they say to try to demonize the craft. And of course it's ridiculous. But because of that, I think that was another reason why people just didn't, talk about it much and didn't want to make their affiliations known, because people would judge them.
Yeah.
And I can appreciate that to a point, but You know, the other thing that you and I talked about is that, you know, we're living in some really strange and difficult times. And, you know, I don't want to get overly political and start labeling people and this group of people is right and this people is wrong, are wrong. But, you know, there is a lot of misunderstanding about the Constitution, about the Founding Fathers, about Freemasonry, about the Constitution in our country. And
Let's get into that. Let's get more into that.
Okay, well,
let's talk about the Constitution. How about that? I mean,
you
I didn't
asked,
cut you
brother.
off,
Here it comes.
So like I've been hearing this a lot, you know, especially just people trying to say, you know, this is a Christian nation.
No.
You know, this is the founding fathers, you know, believed in Jesus and they were all Christians. And I want from a Freemason, knowing that some of our founding fathers, or many of our founding fathers, were Freemasons. I just want to know what you think about that. What's going on with the Constitution?
Okay, well, first of all, let's be clear about one thing. Our founding fathers were not Christians. They were deists, okay? They believed in a higher power. I believe in a higher power. Freemasons are required to believe in a higher power.
Okay.
Who that higher power is, how you venerate that higher power is up to you. You can be a Christian, you can be a Buddhist, you can be a Jewish, you can be a Muslim, you can be anything you want. Indigenous brothers take their obligation on an eagle feather, because at the end of the day, whatever you call deity, we're all talking about the same thing, right? So for people to say this is a Christian nation is 100% absolutely wrong. Now, it is a fact that most of the people living in America are Christian, right? Which begs the next question, which kind of Christian? Okay? Now, I'm not going to go into that debate, but it isn't all the same thing. The point is that we embrace all faiths, all religions, or no religion. That's your business. That's up to you. That's a personal relationship you have, and frankly, it's nobody else's business.
Yeah.
And let me tell you the dirty little secret about what's happening today with this Christian nationalism and what happened back in the days of our founding fathers and their ideological descendants, the Knights Templar, when they were persecuted by the King of France and the Roman Catholic Church. And the reason is very simple. It all boils down to one thing, is that in Freemasonry and in other faiths, you can have a relationship with deity all by yourself. You can have that communication, that spiritual relationship with whoever that deity is, all by yourself. You do not need a human conduit. And the minute you take away that human conduit, you literally put the Roman Church out of business. And that's it. That's the dirty little secret. That is why they hate us. And so be it. But know this, people. You don't need a priest. You don't need a cleric. You don't need an intermediary to have a relationship with God or Yahweh or Great Spirit, whatever you want to call it. You could do that all by yourself. And if you want to read more about it, if you want to get together with like-minded people, go for it. But you shouldn't have to follow a bunch of stupid rules to achieve salvation. It shouldn't cost you anything.
Yeah.
You can do it all by yourself. That's my personal opinion, but those are the facts. And there you go.
Yeah, and I mean, I appreciate that, and I know some people might be offended by that, and
why? Why be offended?
I mean,
don't be offended. Look, I have as much of a right to express my opinion as you have to express your faith and what you think. Oops.
Yep.
Oh, we got some aggressive drivers here. We're good.
No.
We're good. It's all good.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I know you're driving, and I hope I don't cause you an accident or something. But
Interstate, I turned for 15 minutes, so don't worry about it.
all right. Yeah, let's talk about the Constitution though, real quick.
Okay.
You know, because I've been hearing a lot of people, you know, in the news, in the media, and whatever, talking about how, you know, there should be no separation of church and state, and that's what the founding fathers wrote into the Constitution. So
the language in the Constitution does not say there needs to be a separation of church and state. What's in there is they say that there is not going to be a national religion, that you are free to practice whatever religion that you want. The genesis of that tenet in our Constitution goes back to the persecution of the Knights Templar by a monarchy and the Roman Church, when the two institutions would legitimize each other to elevate their institutions above the people. Our founding fathers understood this. They were the bloodline and ideological descendants of those Templar Knights that were persecuted by those two institutions. And the reason that they wrote our Constitution the way they did, with that freedom of religion clause in it, was because they did not want that to happen again. And that is what is happening now. That is the path that we are on. So these people that are directing that path are they are lying to us and being intentionally evasive about exactly what is in the Constitution. And it is now time for Freemasons like me and my other brothers to stand up and say, tap the brakes, stop talking, and listen.
yeah,
Because make no mistake about it, Chad, our country was founded on the tenets of Freemasonry. Period. End of story. So if you want to truly understand what our founding fathers intended, you need to study Freemasonry. And one of the most important tenets is that freedom of religion. You're free. And so this Christian nationalism that is starting to really rear its ugly head, and our Supreme Court is absolutely compromised, and let's just call it what it is. It's a Roman Christian court that does not represent the people of this country, and it's wrong.
I agree.
It's wrong. Roe v. Wade is, I think, is going to be devastating for the people that support overturning it, because that is not what, the majority of the population wants. Now, if a person doesn't want to have an abortion, don't have one. That's your right. But it's not your right to tell other people what to do. These are the same people that were saying, I'm not getting a COVID shot. You can't tell me what to do with my own body, but they're perfectly happy to tell a woman what she can do with her body.
Yep.
This is the kind of stuff that's happening. And there's other examples, but this is the one that is near and dear to a lot of people's heart. And again, if you don't believe in abortion, if you're pro-life, good for you. That's great. But don't tell me what I have to believe just because you're dead set on what you think is right, and you're going to force your beliefs on me. Because I guarantee you're not going to let me do it to you. So why is it okay to do it the other way?
Yeah.
Am I something, Chad?
Are you what?
Am I missing something here?
No. I think everything you're saying, I agree with. The thing that's been really scary, I think for a lot of people lately too, is just seeing this. I've been seeing it on Facebook. I've been seeing it on Instagram, on different socials, Twitter, whatever. But just people talking about fighting and talking about a civil war, and we don't want to come to that. But
No.
a lot of it has been from I've been, seeing it a lot from Christians, which is really scary. And I think that's what the Christian nationalism thing, that's what's going on is, it seems like they want a civil war, they want to fight. And it's like, hey, no, we just want human rights for people, and we want equality,
No.
we want unity,
This, this is what happens when people become radicalized. And, I'm sorry if I offend people, but I'm just going to tell you, it's an institution that from the day you come out of the womb, you're being brainwashed to believe certain things that simply are not true. And I'm sorry, but it's just not true. There is no hell, okay? I like to think that, that there's a better place when we pass. I don't know, but I do know that hell is a human invention, and you're not going to go to hell, so just don't worry about it, okay? I kind of lost my train of thought here, but
no, it's fine.
it's no, I know what it was. Okay, so
go ahead.
People want to go to war. Okay,
Yeah.
Well, how are you going to identify your enemy when we're talking about ideological differences, right? Do you walk down the street with an AK-47 and say, "Hey, buddy, are you a Republican or a Democrat?" And then if he's a Democrat, you're going to start shooting, because the people that are going to ask the question are Republicans. Let's be honest, okay? So how does that going to work? The other thing that people need to understand, and make no mistake about it, the long-range goal of the Roman Catholic Church is world domination, one religion with one monarchy at the top, and that's the Pope. And that is their ultimate goal. Know that, okay? Now, if you think that's okay, good for you, but I don't want that to happen, because when that happens, your freedoms will be taken away. And if you don't think so, you're a fool. But that's what will happen. And so the other thing that they want to do in this country, that the church wants to see happen, and we're on that road, is they don't want a 50-state union, right? They want everything to be done on a state level. They want to break up the United States. And places like Texas want to secede. And, Florida right now with Ron DeSantis is like, we don't need any help from the government, but, oh, yeah, well, that hurricane that just hit, we'll take the money now, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we're either a republic that is based on democratic principles, or we're not. And our founding fathers wanted that. So if you believe in the Constitution, you believe in what our founding fathers intended, and this is what I hear these people say, then you want our republic to be strong. You want us to have free and fair elections, which, by the way, we have. Mm-hmm. There is no evidence anywhere that anything untoward had happened, right? Yeah. And the only people that have been convicted of voter fraud are those guys. So have faith in our institution, believe in the Constitution, the real meaning behind the Constitution. And, our founding fathers were not perfect, right? They had slaves, but it was a different era. And I'm not trying to apologize for their having slaves, but context is important. And eventually that right was made better. We're not where we need to be yet. But these founding fathers were amazing guys. And when it comes to some of these issues that we're talking about right now, namely freedom of religion, mm-hmm. and, a republic with democratic principles, not a monarchy. Yeah. That's what they intended. And they did one hell of a good job of putting this Constitution together. It does need a little bit of tweaking now and then, but we survived a big scare, and now we got to fix it to make sure that that doesn't happen again. Because this is an amazing country that we live in, and everybody is free to believe what they want, and let's just keep going down that road. It's a great thing.
I agree with you, and I think what kind of makes me hopeful is this younger generation is really, I've been seeing it. It's really about, and I excuse me, everyone, if I keep burping. It happens when I drink beer. But
I wish I was burping with you.
I keep making frog noises. But this younger generation, they're really about unity and sticking up for each other and coming together. And I think we're going to start seeing that a lot in the voting, with voting. And I think that's really what, a lot of people are, scared of, because they want to control the voting, and, certain people can't vote here, certain people can't vote there. But like, let's have everybody vote. Like, let's get, it's like, we need voting rights,
No. I want to echo something that you said. I think is really important. And, I'm sure you heard it. I definitely heard it from the older generation when I was a young guy that, these young kids, they don't know how to work. They're not like, it used to be in our day, right? And I got to tell you, the young people that I have interacted with are a hell of a lot smarter than I was at their age. They're more savvy, they're caring, and they're really sharp, and they care about the future. And
Yeah.
that's one of the things that gives me hope, is these young people really have got their shit together. And,
Yeah.
the people in power now, eventually we got to hand it off to them. And there's a responsibility that we have to our kids, our grandkids, and the ones we'll never meet, to try to make this place better than we found it, right? Because this is a beautiful country, it's a beautiful world, and I'm really troubled by what's happening right now. But the one area of hope are the young people that are coming up to take our place. And so we need to be good stewards. We need to be good mentors and coach them up, right? And they're going to be more than capable of taking the ball and running far with it. So that was a really good point you made.
Well, I have a lot of respect for you, because I've watched some of your lectures. I've seen some of your interviews. Shout out to Jimmy Church. He has some great interviews with you. And John Majorowski. Yeah. So like, you've been raising up women a lot, and whenever I hear you talk, you're really like, you're talking about, I think, brothers maybe starting to accept women into Freemasonry, or could you talk a little bit more about that? And we can go into the goddess and all that stuff too.
You mean about guys that might be interested in joining our gentle craft?
Yeah, but women, I want to know more about like women, in Freemasonry and stuff like that.
Great question. That was one of the things that frankly bothered me when I was first researching the craft. And what about the ladies? And as I have done my research on the Templars and eventually Freemasonry, there is a deep reverence and respect for the feminine aspect of the Godhead and the goddess, right? So why aren't they involved in Freemasonry? Well, actually, if we go back far enough, women were involved. And I can tell you flat out, there's nothing in Freemasonry that we do that the ladies can't handle. But, it's also been brought up that women are a distraction. Now, I think that's a bit shallow, frankly, but the truth of the matter is, there is something to be said for that. And when you're doing ritual and you're doing degrees, there are some things that could be a little bit awkward for, to have both sexes involved, but I don't think it's prohibitive. But in any case, there are other options. Certainly for the ladies, we have the Eastern Star, we have Job's Daughters, Daughters of the Nile within Freemasonry, and those are, they have their own degrees, but there are other orders out there that are non-Masonic that involve women, and I'm aware of those orders, and they are great. I think that the lady bringing women into the esoteric aspects of Freemasonry, which is what I enjoy the most, really adds value and helps sort of broaden the experience and expand the experience and the knowledge. And like I said, there's nothing that women can't handle that is in Freemasonry. But I also respect the tradition. I'm not here to try to change it over. I enjoy it, and I guess that's all I really have to say about that. There are options for women, and I don't necessarily agree that they shouldn't be involved. But like I said, I'm not here to change the institution.
Yeah, no, I understand that. Your wife Janet, she wrote a book about. I haven't read it, but it's what's it called? It's The Goddess in Washington.
It's called America, Nation of the Goddess, and she co-authored it with a good friend of ours named Alan Butler, who's a brilliant British researcher who's written amazing books about the Templars and the feminine aspect of the Godhead. Their book is one of them, but if you want to read some amazing books, check out Alan Butler, and I would recommend that you start with The Goddess, the Grail, and the Lodge. It's fantastic.
Okay. The Goddess, the Grail, and the Lodge?
The Goddess, the Grail, and the Lodge, yes.
Okay.
And it talks about what I was just talking about, the aspects of the goddess that the Templars embraced. The goddess is in the lodge. I recently gave a lecture with a colleague and dear friend, Haley Ramsey, who just submitted a manuscript called The Bringers of Life, and it's about the goddess. And she talks about, in her book, as I do in a book that I'm about to publish, about the goddess in the lodge. And what's happened is the goddess has always been a part of Freemasonry, but since the time of our founding fathers, she has become veiled. But I will tell you, through Haley's work and my own work and Alan and Janet's work, the goddess, she's still there.
Okay, so about that. So in Washington, D.C., there are statues of goddesses. Am I right about that, or am I wrong?
Well, if you go to D.C. and you walk around the National Mall and you start counting the statues, you're going to see that the men the women's statues, the female statues, outweigh the male statues by at least 3 to 1, maybe 4 to 1. And wow. I don't think that's a coincidence.
No, and I'm glad you said that, because I don't think a lot of people know that. So that's very interesting.
Yes. And there's a lot of symbolism that is attached to those statues. And I just would ask people, if you want to read the book or go to my blog, you'll learn a lot. And then go to DC and you'll see it in a whole different way.
Yeah. And speaking of books, I just want to shout out, I finished your book.
I recognize that.
Hey, that's The Cryptic Code of the Templars in America, if anyone wants to check that out. That's your third book out of the series, right?
It's the third one. It's the third one in the Hooked Deck series, but actually there's a book that precedes that called The Kensington Runestone, Compelling New Evidence. And that's almost a 600-page book that is absolutely addresses every aspect of the Kensington Runestone, which is 100% an authentic artifact. It was created as a medieval Knights Templar land claim that really represented the beginning of the founding of this country. Our founding fathers knew all about it. And the reason that we went to such lengths is because it is the most important historical artifact in the history of this country. And currently it is considered a hoax because the Roman Catholic Church, which is one of the chief financiers of things like Wikipedia, the Smithsonian Institution, and other places where people get their information, they do not want this artifact to be accepted as genuine, because what happens is it triggers a series of dominoes to fall that go to inconvenient places for the Roman Church and its ideology that, frankly, is the most destructive ideology in the history of humanity. And that's the truth, folks. So there you go.
Let's talk. Okay, let's talk. Do you still have some time? Are we good on time with you?
I'm getting to my hotel here. I have a meeting coming up pretty soon, but if you want to take a couple more minutes, let's cover one more thing. We can always come back and do it again.
Yeah, I mean, I would love that to come. Well, let's just you know, I'm calling this BrewFOs. So let's go to UAPs, UFOs. All right. Is that cool with you?
Oh yeah.
Okay. So what I understand is, you know, I just like a lot of people, probably the UFO thing wasn't on their radar. I had friends bring it up, and I was kind of like, okay, yeah, you know, all right, whatever. But then in 2017, that New York Times article came out about, you know, these videos that the Pentagon's now confirmed are real, and now we have legislation from Congress. You know, we have UAP legislation. There's another, I guess, Defense Act bill or more legislation that in December I think is going to be signed in that whistleblowers are now going to be able to come forward, and they're not going to. They're allowed to come forward. They're allowed to break their oath in order to testify to Congress. So this stuff's getting pretty crazy and real. Sam Harris has brought up that he was contacted by the government to kind of help with disclosure, and then I heard that you were as well.
That's right. Yep.
So this is true.
It's true. Yeah.
Okay. So what does this involve here? I mean, what can you tell us about? Somebody from the DoD contacted you, or what's going on here?
Yeah, I got a call a couple of years ago from a guy who asked me kind of in an interesting way if I was interested in being involved with disclosure. And there was a little bit of a tap dance, getting to know each other and vetting each other, but eventually we got past that. And you know, I like to think that part of the reason that he contacted me, and he said as much, is, you know, that he thought I had some credibility and that people would, you know, hopefully listen to some of the things that we would say. And I just want people to understand that I went through quite a bit of education trying to understand what the situation was and exactly what it all meant. But eventually I did get to a point where I was comfortable with what the information he was telling me. And I'll just give you a quick synopsis of what he has said. Hang on one sec. I'm just going to throw this on the cart. Hold on.
Yeah, do it. Go for it.
Basically what he said was, the Earth is one of the crown jewels of the interstellar community. And there are not a lot of planets out there that are as teeming with life as the Earth. And there are multiple races of aliens out there, and they are not going to let Earth be destroyed by humans. And make no mistake, we are destroying the planet. And for those, you know, climate deniers and all that, get over it. We are in trouble. And anyone that has even a slight proclivity towards the scientific method needs to realize that we are in trouble. I just read an article today that over 1 billion king crabs up in Alaska have disappeared, and that basically there is going to be no king crab hunting season because there aren't any, and they don't want to. Their population has been reduced by 90% because the water is warming, and they need cold water. That's just one example of a myriad of issues that we have right now with climate change. So that's a reality that we all have to face up to. And if we don't, it's going to mean our demise. So the the other problem that, or the other thing that will destroy the planet, or I should say the one thing that will destroy the planet, is nuclear weapons. And I was told that you don't have to worry about Putin dropping a bomb because the aliens will not allow it. And because that would destroy the ionosphere and that would destroy the planet. So they're not going to let that happen. And apparently they've shut it down many times in the past. So they're pulling for us. They want us to be successful, but they're not going to intercede. It's a lot like the prime directive on Star Trek. It's up to us. And that's part of the reason why I'm speaking up so loudly and so boldly is we don't have a lot of time. And we don't have time to screw around. We got to get after it and get after it now if we want to survive. So the other thing that he said is there are about 2.5% of the United States population are them. They look like us, or at least one species looks like us, and some know they're aliens, some don't.
What?
Yeah.
So okay. So like, I know some people are kind of like me. They're still trying to like just come to terms that there's craft and other weird things floating around in the skies. So we all know that the Pentagon's confirmed that. But what you're saying is like, that's like, I can understand, like, I think there's, no matter what, I think there's other life out there, but that's something that's really hard for, you know, for my brain to go, okay.
I can appreciate,
you know, so
I can look, it took me a while to get my head around this too, but I've had some experiences that, pardon the pun, were otherworldly. And you know, I'm a scientist, and I've always been very pragmatic, and everything has an explanation, and 1 + 1 is 2, and all of that. But you know, I've come to realize that it's not always that way. There are other things that are going on out there. They communicate telepathically. I have read a lot of the work of Dr. Stephen Greer. I really like what he says, what he does. The whole Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind makes sense to me. And I mean, let's face it, all of us that are walking on this planet have a certain amount of intuition. And, you know, we have things that happen to us at times in our lives when we can't explain it, right? You think about somebody, and then a second later they text you or they call you, or you have a feeling of dread and you find out that, you know, somebody passed. And what is that all about?
yeah.
I don't know if those are good examples, but we all have an innate abilities that we haven't even tapped into, that you know, we have talked about with the contact. And really all he said is, you know, when you're doing interviews like this, is just speak the truth, let people know what's going on out there. And, you know, not everybody's going to buy into this. In fact, most people are going to say that Wolter's on dope, you know, but we don't need to convince everybody. We need to get a certain amount of the population to buy into this, to work for change. And he said that'll be enough. So let's hope people take this seriously and, you know, cherish our planet. I mean, my God, this is our home. There is nowhere else for us to go. So we need to take care of it. And
this is the Eden. This is the Eden that they've, you know, been talking about. It's already
the
right
new
here.
Atlantis, as Francis Bacon said. Absolutely, this is our home, and we need to start taking better care of it.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with that. like I said, like it's not, that's so much to take in. I'm still dealing with what are these UAPs, So,
I hear you, man. But you know what? I encourage people to do their own research, to consider what I've said today, objectively, carefully, factually, and decide for yourself what you think makes sense. And then, if you agree with some of the things that we've talked about, then act upon it. Speak up, talk to other people, and, above all else, demand truth. I mean, my God, the word light means knowledge. The more knowledge you have, our founding fathers were all about education. They believed that the better educated a society was, the more successful it will be, and that's true. So enlighten yourselves, learn, read, and have discussions with your friends, your family, your kids. And don't be afraid to talk about these tough issues, because we're dealing with a lot right now, and we need to get with it.
And Scott, I really respect too that just, your ongoing, like, pretty solid message I've seen you speaking about is us coming together, us learning, and, kind of the love and light positivity kind of thing. And
Yeah.
I just really appreciate that. And anyone that's spreading that message, I'll get behind. So
well,
it'll take me a while for the alien thing. I'm telling you, man, like I think it's definitely more probable than not, but like, I just,
take your time and, just do your own research and, come to your own conclusion. And that's what I did. And I don't have any doubt about it. I mean, it's become more and more prevalent, on social media, and there's a reason for that. So anyway, you'll get there when the time comes, or you won't, and it's all good, brother. It's all good.
Well, yeah, I appreciate that, and I appreciate you talking with me today. We should do it again. If you're ever in San Diego, if you and Janet want to, go get a local beer.
All right, that sounds good. I was going to say, I want that beer, man. You owe me a beer.
We'll do BrewFOs in person. So
sounds good. Well, listen, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it. And let's definitely do it again. So this was fun, and I'll be ready the next time.
Awesome. Thank you, Scott.
Okay, Chad. Thank you, man.
Have a good day.
All right. Bye-bye.